Hey everyone, I hit it again. Hey everyone, welcome back to White Sparrow Living, Luke 12:6. I'm Wendy and I'm so happy you're here. I'm happy I'm here. Today we're doing 4 more Dollar Tree DIYs for your fall farmhouse home decor. If you like these projects, don't forget to give them a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think. Also, I want to give a huge Patreon shout out to the newest members. I have Mrs. Eugene Icing and Melissa. And so I just want to say thank you and hugs from me to you. If you're not already, I hope you'll consider subscribing by hitting that big red button down below, as well as the little bell right next to it so that you can be notified every time I upload a brand new video. And now, without further ado, let's get started. For our first Dollar Tree DIY, I'm going to be using an orange dinner plate and saucer, 2 plate holders, a decal I cut out, some scrap burlap, some 5/8 inch ribbon, raffia, 2 burlap leaves, a laser cut cross, some eucalyptus. What else is in there? I don't even know. So this is a great project to get rid of some of your scraps, and this burlap is at the end of the roll, so it's all curly-cued. So I just cut that in half and then made it look like a little stem, and I'm going to hot glue that onto the back of my plates. And I'm using a silicone makeup spatula to get that hot glue down and it doesn't stick on there. And anytime I'm gluing down burlap, it never fails. I will burn my fingers, so I would recommend using some finger protectors that they do carry at the Dollar Tree. And then I'm going to take my burlap leaf and I'm just going to wrap that around the stem and glue it down in the back using the wire that's attached. And then for my smaller plate, I'm going to use the same leaf, but I'm going to cut it in half to make it smaller and just keep the top part. And then you can just pull off that bottom piece so that you have the wire that's still available to use to attach it to the back. So the next thing I did was cut out my decal using my Cricut Explore Air. What do I have? I have the 2. Oh gosh. I'm so losing it. Anyway, I used a scrap piece of adhesive vinyl and I'm just going to cut out the words, "In all things, give thanks," and I used the font called the Skinny Bold. And so I'm just going to put my transfer tape on top and squeegee it down just like we do with all of our decals. And I will have this available in our Etsy shop at White Sparrow Living. So now I'm just going to take a paper towel and clean off my plates and get all the ickies off, and then I'll apply my decal right in the middle. So the big one will say "In all things," and then the smaller one will say "Give thanks." So I had the large dinner plate since last year and I just ran out of time and didn't get to do this project. But it was perfect because I didn't find the smaller one until this year, and so I was able to separate it and do 2 of them, and I think it's cutier patootier, so that worked out really well. So now I'm going to take some of Dollar Tree's eucalyptus and I'm just going to pull off some of those tips and hot glue those to the front on both sides of my stems, and then I'm just going to take some raffia, tie it together and just make a little messy bow, and then attach that right at the bottom of the stem. And then I'll just do the same thing on the larger one using a little bit longer pieces of that eucalyptus. But this time I used a piece of chenille stem to attach it all together and make a little bundle, and then I glued it to the bottom of the stem. So now I'm going to make a perky bow, and instead I'm doing it the easy way where you just cut strips and then we're going to twist it about 1/3 of the way down and then stack our little loops together, alternating the patterns, and then you'll do the same thing with the other set, but you're going to flip them around so that our loops are facing the other way. And this method just makes it to where the loops are intermingled, so you have the different patterns going all throughout your little perky bow. You could also do the fold over method and then do the little snips in the middle, put your chenille stem or whatever you're using through those snips so that you can maneuver the loops and make them intermingle. But this way it's already done for you, if that makes sense. So then I'm just going to dovetail all of the ends. In this case, I used the wired jute so that I could use those as some of the little tendrils that I'll curly cue at the ends. And then I'll hot glue that onto the top of the rest of the bundle of prettiness. And then I'm going to take a teeny tiny little pine cone and tuck that just under my bow. And then I'll add a little bit more Jesus by taking one of these laser cut wooden pieces from the Dollar Tree. And I had a sweet viewer send this to me, so thank you so much. And I'm just going to take a piece of jute twine, tie it onto my cross, and then wrap it around my stem. And I used a little piece of hot glue to keep it over towards the side where I wanted it and just let it hang there. And then to display them, I just set them on top of a pair of Dollar Tree plate holders. They usually come with a large one and a small one. But I love how these turned out, and what a perfect message to have during the fall, during Thanksgiving, really any time of year. But with the orange, we're gonna go with fall and because of the pumpkins. But I love them and I hope you like them too. For our next Dollar Tree DIY, I'm going to be using 3 of these styrofoam pumpkins, and because I'm going to be covering them with some sweater material, they're so bright, I think if you covered them in plywood, the orange would still show through. So I'm going to paint them white first just to make sure none of that orange shows through my sweater material. So in my last video, I covered a pumpkin wreath form with my Uncle Fred sweater, this particular one, but I also had a couple others that kind of went together as far as the colors. So none of these fit, and one of them was all stained up, so don't worry, he will be warm during this winter. So I'm just going to take a strip and hot glue that and make sure that I can cover up that seam. That'll be the back anyway. And then I'm going to cut a hole at the very top of my pumpkin and then just start pressing that fabric into it and using my fingers first. And then I start using a little handle that I had cut off for a project coming up. And then ultimately it starts to get so tight that I'm going to use my needle nose pliers to get that in there. But you don't need any glue or anything on the top if it's nice and tight. And since the sweater material is so bulky, it stays snug as a bug in a rug. And at the bottom, I'm going to cut that fabric down and then make little snips so that I can hot glue it down and it'll overlap and sit flat. So when I was cutting my strip for my pumpkins, I also cut off the bottom band of the sweater because I'm going to use that for my stems. So all I'm going to do is roll it up to the size that I want, and then I'll cut it off, and then I'll unwind it and then roll it starting with that raw edge, and then my fold where I have it folded over, that'll be the end piece so it has a clean finish. And then I'll hot glue those closed and then hot glue it onto my pumpkin. You could use the band that goes with the sweater that you're gluing it onto to make it all one color, but I just decided to mix and match them so that there was a little bit of contrast between the stem and the pumpkin itself. So then I took some jute twine and I'm just going to wrap it around my stem and cut it off and make a sweet little bow. And you know how the jute twine is kind of curlied already just from being on the spool? It has a really cute look, so I just left that hanging down. So then I took some scrap Dollar Tree leaves and I painted those in different shades using some white and just a little bit of truffle chalk paint, and then hot glued those to the side of each of my pumpkins. And then for some more natural cuteness, I'm going to be using these wood roses. They're not really wood, I don't know what they are, but they feel kind of like it's made out of some kind of foam or something. I don't know. So I just put those on the side of 2 of my pumpkins because I only had 2. And then I had these little square thingies that reminded me of beads. So I'm just going to take 4 of those and hot glue those on to the 3rd one. And here they are all finished. And I love these so much. These can go anywhere. I put them in a tray, added some books and a little candle holder to lift up the 3rd one, and then a plant. But I love how this turned out, and I hope you like it too. So Dollar Tree now carries 1x2 wood pieces in 8-inch and 12-inch lengths. And I know wood prices had gone up for a minute, but Michael J said they're coming back down. So it is cheaper to go to Lowe's or Home Depot. And the pieces on the right are primed, and so they're a little bit more expensive. But the regular 1x2 furring strips come to only 23 cents per foot in the 8-foot lengths. So for convenience, Dollar Tree is the way to go, and you don't have to worry about cutting them. But for price-wise, Lowe's is the better deal. And I also have heard from some viewers that scrap pieces are free at Home Depot. So anyway, I'm going to paint all of my pieces white. And then for my stems, I'm going to take some sponge paintbrush handles and just pull those off and use my Waverly wax in Antique and just paint that on and then wipe it off with a paper towel to give it a pretty stained look. And then I'm going to take my pieces and I'll put an X on the inside of 2 of those and then on the back of 1 so that I know I only need to sand the outsides of my pumpkin and then the tops and bottoms, of course, and then on the one that has the X on the back, I'm going to sand that all the way around because the insides won't show. So to put it together, I'm going to place my little handle in between those 2 pieces, and then I'll put some hot glue down and put my top piece on top right in the middle, and then pull my little stem out and make sure that it's going to be flat so it will stand on a counter or tabletop. And then I'm going to turn it over and hot glue my stem inside in between that opening there. And then I took my handy dandy brad nailer, which I will have in my Amazon store that I got for my birthday from Michael J. And I'm just going to pop in some brads so that it stays all together and is completely secure. So now to frou-frou these up, I'm going to take some 2.5-inch buffalo check ribbon and I'm just going to tie that on there and dovetail the ends. And I got this at Hobby Lobby for $5, but you can get that also at Dollar Tree when they have it. And then I'm going to take some wired jute and wrap that around there as well, and those will be our little tendrils. And the ends come undone all the time as soon as you cut it, so to alleviate that, to keep it on the wire, just use a little bit of hot glue and wrap it around. And then I'll curly cue those up, and I wanted to add a little bit of orange, so I had this burlap ribbon from the Dollar Tree. And I'm just going to cut off the shiny sides and then cut it down to the size I want, and then I'll just fray the edges so that it looks more rustic, and I'll tie that right on top. So now I'm going to take some of this adorable orange and white baker's twine, and I'm just going to wrap around about 4 times on each side and make a sweet little bow, and then I'll attach that around the stem of my pumpkin as well. And I always leave the ends longer than they need to be, just in case I want to leave it there or add beads or whatever the case may be. My options are always open, but I did end up cutting them off after I got it attached. So now I'm going to take a Sharpie, and it actually doesn't work on this particular tag. This tag I had made in my last video, and I was kind of experimenting with it as far as the finish, but I'll have that video linked above and below. So I do have to use a paint pen that I get from Walmart, and I'm going to write "Hey there pumpkin" and attach that to the side of my middle-sized pumpkin with some more of that baking twine and hang it over to the side, and it's done. And here's how they turned out, and I think they are so adorable. These are perfect for a shelf if you're decorating for fall, to use as a filler or maybe even on a fireplace mantle. If you don't want to do the sanding, you could always just add some antique wax to the edges to distress it, but I love how they turned out and I hope you like them too. For this project, we're going to be using 2 packs of the Hot Wheel racetracks, some moss, a square sign, a dowel, and some floral foam. And the first thing I did was put my glasses on, apparently. And then I'm just going to take my drill and drill in a pilot hole to the bottom of my dowel, because I'm going to stick that onto my sign so that I have a little stand. So I just drilled a hole into my sign, and I left the little thankful part on there so that there was even more wood to grab onto and make it more stable. And then I took a small screw and just screwed it up in there and then twisted my dowel onto that screw. So now I have a stand type thingy. So now I'm going to take my race tracks and I want to make the holes that are already on there be able to fit over my dowel, but I also don't want them to be too loose. I want them to be tight enough so that they all stay in place when I shove it on there. So this, I got a couple of battle wounds doing this, so please be careful if you do this project. So I'm going to take my craft knife and just cut in some slits and get rid of the side pieces, because when I stack these on top of each other, I want them to lay flat. And I'll also shave off the back part or the bottom part of my racetrack so that it's as flat as I can possibly make it. That'll make sense in just a second once you see how I put it together. And then those holes, since they're just a tad smaller than that dowel, I'm going to take my scissors and make little slits so that it'll just kind of poke in there and go over that dowel and still be tight. So then I'm just going to start crisscrossing these, and I'm using 6 of them so that we're making a pumpkin, and it'll be kind of like a sphere, or what do you call that? Like an orb, I guess. So I'm just going to slide those down, and then I'll slide the top ones on there, but I'll put a piece of floral foam over the dowel in the center so we can put some florals and greenery all inside. Another perky prize Michael J got me for my birthday is this Milwaukee rotary tool. So I'm just going to use that to cut off the excess of my dowel. And then I'm going to take my whole piece outside and spray paint it white. And then I'm going to take these adhesive puffy dots and I'm going to stick those all along the centers of each of my racetracks. And then I'll take my white chalk paint and paint those all up. Now I was going to distress this, but because I didn't get all in the cracks where the orange was, I decided to leave that, because in another DIY that I did where I made this lantern using these tracks, I just went in with a smaller paintbrush and got all of the orange covered, but I decided to leave this the way it was so that you could see that orange and it kind of counted as the distressing. So then I'm going to hot glue some Spanish moss into the middle of my piece, and then I'm going to take some eucalyptus leaves from Walmart, and I'm just going to start placing those all around the edges of my floral foam. One thing I did realize afterwards is that it was a little bit harder to push in my greenery from the top because I did use a little bit too much hot glue, and the floral moss will probably stay in place once you poke those picks in there anyway. So now I'm taking some Dollar Tree amaranthus and poking those in there. I've got some pretty oranges and brownish colors, and then I'm going to lighten that up with some white sunflowers, but I decide to put all of my dark ones in first, and then I'll put my white ones in afterwards. So I love these so much. These look like pine cones, so I'm just cutting these apart and putting them in individually. And I'll take some berries in the greens and browns, pop those in there, and then add my lighter flowers in afterwards. And I found this one bouquet. It was the only one I could find that had a sweet little pumpkin in there too, so I'll poke that in there as well. And then I'm taking some mesh tubing in this really pretty brown color, and I'm going to use that as the stem. So I just wrapped that all the way up my stem and then back down and tied it at the bottom. And then I did take a little piece and shoved it over the very tippy top of my stem, but you'll see that a little bit later. And then Dollar Tree is notorious for having some really pretty ribbons, and they're wired, but they've got that foil-like material at the end where it's really shiny. You could use it with the shininess. If you love the shininess, use it. But I wanted to cover that up, but I still wanted the wire to be on the ends of the ribbon. So I exercised my fruit of patience, and I just used my detail hot glue gun to fold that in twice so that it was still inside of there, but the shininess wasn't showing. And then I'll use some more of that orange burlap ribbon, some brown burlap, and then the small woven ribbon. And I'm going to do the same type of bow that we made on our little pumpkins by folding those strips over and then alternating them with pattern and making sure that I have the loops going in the opposite direction as well. Now this was my original design, and then after I got done with it, I liked how it looked, but for this year I'm going with the neutrals and maybe adding in a little bit of the blues. So once I get this one completely done, because I did have that orange distressing around the edges, which was what this was meant to be, I do decide to change it and go a different direction, but I still wanted you guys to see this look in case these are the colors you're using in your home decor. And you can see here, once you get your bow together, there's really no foofing of your loops that needs to be done. And then I just dovetailed the edges, and my chenille stem, I'm going to use the excess to attach it to the top of my pumpkin. And then I'm going to take a pretty heavy duty dowel from the Dollar Tree and stick it into my floral foam. And then I found this adorable little pumpkin that says thankful on it, and it matched perfectly, and I stuck that in there. And again, I love this bow, I love this look, and I love that that has the orange around the edges of the outside of the pumpkin. But you know, I changed my mind quite a bit, so I just decided to redo it. So I'm deconstructing the entire thing, pulling my bow off, and I'll save that for another project. I took all of my greenery out and my flowers, and I just left the eucalyptus at the bottom. And then I'm going to take 3 of these Dollar Tree pumpkins that have the pretty little flowers inside, and I'm just going to rip those flowers right out of there. And then I'm going to take a skewer. You can always use a stem from a pick if you don't have skewers or dowels. And I'm going to paint all of my pumpkins using my Waverly White chalk paint. And then I took 2 more of my sponge paintbrush handles, stained them again with the Waverly Wax and Antique, and then using my little Milwaukee rotary tool, I'm going to cut those in half. And then I'll poke those into the top of our pumpkins and then make a mark so I know what to cut out to kind of make it a little bit hollow with my scissors. And then I'll add some hot glue, and then those become our stems. And then since these pumpkins are smaller, I'm using paddle wire for the tendrils, and then tying some sweet little striped linen ribbon from burlapfabric.com around the stem. And I'll have this link below with a coupon code. And then again, I'm using a pin to wrap my wire for those curly cues. And then to give them some distressing cuteness, I used some antique wax and a rounded paintbrush and just dabbed on some distress marks in random places so it wouldn't look like polka dots. But polka dots would be cute too. And then I used the same method to make my loopy bow using the larger version of the striped ribbon and 3 kinds of Dollar Tree burlap ribbon. But this time I wanted my stripes to be front and center, so I twisted those pieces and put it on top of the burlap, and then added some off-white linen cotton ribbon, also from burlapfabric.com, on top of that. And then because this was such a bulky handful of perkiness, I cut little slits into the middle portion of my burlap ribbons so I could then feed my chenille stem into those, and then I can move the loops around to where I want them. And then I put that at the top of my pumpkin, and then I added some wire LED lights around the bottom and tucked it in through that eucalyptus. I like the look of some of the wire showing, so I didn't hide it all. And the battery pack fits perfectly inside of the little racetrack, so just tuck that in back with the switch accessible so you can turn it on and off. Put your pumpkins in there and it's done. And here it is at night, and oh my goodness, it has the prettiest glow, which is perfect because first you got to set the mood. And then let there be light. Here it is, all finished. I love this so much. I am so proud of this bow. I think it's one of my favorites. But even though it's a lot to grab onto, it's still so pretty and pretty easy to do. Anyway, I love it, and I hope you like it too. I hope you enjoyed all of these projects, and if you did, don't forget to give them a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think. If you're not already, I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button down below and check your bell to make sure you get all of the notifications anytime I upload a brand new video. I hope everyone has a blessed day, and remember to always be the light. Bye!